Welcome to the Iconics Genesis 64 video guide. This video discusses different ways in which numerical states can be represented in either textual or graphical forms.
In your application, you may have some data source representing the status of an asset. So for example, in this case, I have a numerical variable telling me what is the current state of my motor. And because this is just a numerical value, I have added a legend to understand what this actually means. So if I advance the status of the motor with this button, I can see that, for example, the motor is now in the starting state, and then started, stopping, and finally stopped. Now this is okay if you only have a few states, although it's not really nice to see because it's not really user-friendly to see a number and then to have to look at the legend for it. So GraphWorX allows you to do this in a better way, and you can do this in a few different ways, so we will see the possible implementation in this video. The first way is quite basic, and it is done by use of hide dynamics. So what I have done is that I have created a few text labels. Let me hide some of them so we can see. So for example, we have the stopped label, then we have starting, and so on with the others. Each of these labels have a hide dynamic which will hide this object whenever a certain condition occurs. So whenever the data is not equal to 2, it means that I am currently not in this selected status. And I do the same for all the others, and then I have grouped the object together for my convenience. And I have my group here. If I go runtime, I can see that the current state, which is stopped according to the legend, is immediately shown in here. And if I advance the status, I can see the other states. So this is exactly what I need, but there are some other ways to do this. So another way is by means of the state selector dynamic, which is available here. To create a state selector dynamic, you need to create a few labels with some text in it, and then if you select all together, then the state dynamic will be available for you. Let me show you with some simple label here. So I can create this and copy, for example, 4 times. Oops. And then if I select all of them together, I can pick the state selector dynamic. The objects get grouped together, and then the state selector dynamic is applied to the group. And from here I can edit the states, where the conditions are very similar to the one that I have for the hide dynamic. And in this case, I can delete this and we can see this object. It will behave exactly as the group with the hide dynamics, so it is exactly what I want, but it is just a different implementation. The last possible implementation for a text representing the state of my motor is by using the state field, which is probably the easier way to implement this. This is just a simple process point where I have set the state field property to true. This enables me to edit the states property, which is a collection of states, where I can define for each specific condition, for example in this case when the local sim var is equal to low, which is 0, then I tell the system not to show the value 0, but to show this label instead. And as you can see, I have a little button here which let me browse, for example, for language aliases. So in this way I can also make this localizable. So I also have other states for the other conditions, and again this is just a process point. The way you do this, let me show you real quick, is to add a process point, select your variable, and then set the state field to true. I can double click on it to alter the value, and then edit the states. A quick way to do this is to select 4 of them all together, multi-select them to pick the data source once for all of them, and then you can start from the first one and say when the data is equal to 0, put stopped in here, and so on with the others. I will skip the creation because I already created this object. So when I go runtime, I can see these labels behave the same way, and when I advance the status, of course they change their caption. So what I would suggest is to use the state field for this type of example. So when you just have to show some text label in place of a number, you can use the state field. The state selector works okay, however it is more meant to be used with images, for example. You can still use it with text, but it is more helpful if you are creating, for example, some icons to represent the current states and you want to show them. So it's exactly the same thing as for the text labels for the configuration part of it. However, the states will look a little bit different. Rather than showing the text in here, you will see a list of icons that I have created for this simple example. So when I go run time, it will behave exactly as you expect. So I have an icon representing the stopped state. When I move on to starting, I have this little triangle which will become dark green when the motor is started, and then light red when stopping, and red when stopped. So this is, as you can see, the state selector is more helpful when working with icons, because you cannot use icons inside this process point. The last way we have seen is by means of the hide dynamics, which is really basic way. It is still working but requires a little more configuration rather than using the state field. And of course, the hide dynamics method will also work with icons, but I would suggest using the state selector in that case.